Here's the last one I have. Righting the wrongs of Cyberpunk 2077 cost CDPR a huge amount. They spent up to 120 million to revive Cyberpunk. Since its release in 2020, Cyberpunk has had a rough this is a weirdly written first paragraph. Since its release back in 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 has had a rough release. Since its release, it's had a rough release? What? Just like translated or something? Um, that's just bad writing if it's not translated. Fans were not happy with the state of the game and its constant issues that plagued the entirety of the game. Yeah, because CDPR released a game that was not finished. So rightfully so, anybody that was looking forward to the game and bought the game, almost everybody anyways, was not happy because they basically promoted and hyped up this game and pushed it out knowing it wasn't ready, and they duped roughly 13 million people on the pre-order and retail purchase of this game right around the release date of the game. So rightfully so, there were a lot of pissed off people. This is the kind of crap I talk about all the time that these companies shouldn't get away with. However, over the last few years, there have been a few bug fixes and updates that have helped bring the game into a playable state. None have made as big of an impact as Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0, which brought thousands of improvements to the game and more content, but at what cost? How did Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0 help to save Cyberpunk? Back in 2020, Cyberpunk was released with a rather negative reception from fans as the game was chock full of issues, bugs, and just in general crashes. This caused Cyberpunk to begin its descent into gamer libraries as most gamers began to lose interest. Over the years, there have been a few updates that began to fix small issues within the game. However, players thought Cyberpunk 2077 could not be saved. Fortunately, due to the Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0, there has been new life brought into Cyberpunk, which has had players return with a whole new view on the game. It's not the only thing that brought people back into the game, to be fair. Prior to this, there was things like the Edge Runners show on Netflix that it put a shot of adrenaline back into the game. There was a huge amount of retail sales that came back into the fold for Cyberpunk 2077. And at that point, to be fair, I mean, the game was in a much better state. I'm not going to give kudos to CDPR. You know what I mean? And being like, oh, well, they did a great job of making the game feel really good and stuff. No, I mean, you know, the game was finally at a state of being much more along the lines of what it should have been on release at that point. And the Edge Runner show on Netflix, the animated series, the anime series, was very good on Netflix. I'll attest to that. Like the Netflix show was very, very good, and it got people's interest back into to Cyberpunk, and retail sales shot back up for the game. It brought a lot more players back into the game, new players into the game, stuff like that. So it's not like this is the only thing that has contributed to people, having piquing people's interest back into Cyberpunk. But Phantom Liberty was a desperate change that was needed for Cyberpunk as it was struggling to keep a player base, which, if it continued, could have led to the game being shut down. Luckily, the changes brought to Cyberpunk, thanks to Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0, help by fixing any lingering bugs that plagued the game. These fixes have altered certain quests and ensure that once a player starts the game, it does not crash and ruin their experience. There was some pretty bad PS5 stuff going on though, even after Liberty City, or Phantom Liberty. I mean, Phantom Liberty came out. PS5 players were having their save files corrupted, so there was still issues. You know, that's something you don't want to see from a developer. That's one of those terrible, terrible, terrible things that they need to make. You know, developers need to make sure is not happening. That cannot happen, dude. So CDPR still is dealing with issues on the side of making sure things are polished and fleshed out before they release their content. I would say that this is, I mean, I think a step in the right direction for them as far as releases, but they've always been better at releasing their expansions than they have releasing their base games, you know? So that's not necessarily a surprise in my opinion either. Came as a surprise to many players, the larger gaming community, as many thought Cyberpunk could never be saved. Some thought it would be a wasted venture by CDPR to attempt to rescue, prove there was something worth saving. And now I think there are too many people out there that are like CDPR blind. Actually, there are too many people out there that give CDPR a pass because CDPR is so good at content. And I will not deny that fact. CDPR is so good at content, but they are so good at content that it makes a lot of, I think, consumers blind to the issues that CDPR has on. They're not great at performance, dude. It takes them a long time to get a game in a really good performing state. And sorry, but how are you supposed to even be able to enjoy the content in a game if the performance is bad all the time? You know, I mean, that's one of the things that I talk about all the time. I don't care what developer it is, you know, but CDPR for quite a while now has had this issue. Um, Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0 were such huge endeavors for CDPR, and they essentially had to comb over the base game of Cyberpunk. This was in addition to creating a brand new set of content for players to enjoy, and understandably, this would cost a lot of money to do. In its development process, Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0 cost CDPR approximately $63 million in development costs and approximately $21 million in US dollars in advertising. Um, Hold on. So, if they want to talk about what it costs CDPR, let me just run some numbers for you real quick so you understand what it costs consumers to buy into a broken ass product in the first place. All right. So we're talking, it was roughly what? I think 13 million. 13 million purchases of retail. Yeah. For pre-order and on release, I think is roughly what that number was. I would need to go back and do a little bit, but I think that's what it was, right? So, for Cyberpunk on release, I'm not talking about Phantom Liberty, but if they want to talk about how much it's costing CDPR, you cannot talk about what it's costing CDPR without talking about how much they duped their consumer, okay? Because they knew this game wasn't ready in the first place. So they want to talk about how much it cost them to get the game, you know what I mean, into whatever state it needed to be or whatever. They duped their player base. They duped us as the consumer as well. It was roughly 13 million, I think, sales they had on retail in the first place, combining around release sales within a few week period of unreleased sales and pre-orders. I think it was around 13 million. If you put that at a $60 price point, you know, obviously this is there's going to be a lot of different things that come into play here. With there's always going to be a percentage that comes out for the platforms that you're selling it on and things like that. So not all of this is going to be taken in by CDPR, but a big chunk of that is, right? Big chunk of that. Yo, what up, Davey? How's it going, man? Let's try and flesh this out. Let's make sure we know. Cyberpunk on release retail sales plus pre-order. Yeah, that's what it was. I think that's what it was. Let's see here. How you doing, Davey? What's up, dude? Sold more than 13 million copies since its launch 2 weeks ago. Word bait, dude. That's what I love to hear, man. How was your weekend, buddy? So right here, 13 million. Yeah. So I was right there. I was remembering pretty correctly there. About 13 million copies. This was 2 weeks after their launch. 13 million copies sold, right? So again, 13 million. Yeah. Like I just said, you're talking, we'll clear this out again. 13 million. 13 million copies. That's just on release. We're not talking about everything else they sold since then. This was 13 million copies on release of a broken ass product, right? Well, it's appropriate for this article that we have up, okay? So, and I'll show you why. So I get you just got here. You didn't see why we got onto this topic and everything, but 13 million copies on release of a product they knew wasn't ready. Yeah. And if you want to time that at the time, I'm guessing, we'll just put a static $60 price point on this. That's $780 million. $780 million. And we're going to have to do a give or take there, right? Because obviously there were different editions of this game that were higher than $60. There's also an amount of what platform are you selling this on, and there's each platform is going to take a cut of the sales and stuff like that too. So, but this gives you an idea of what they were willing to do, yeah, to their consumer base, right? So now that you've seen these numbers, we'll go back here and say that, what they want to do is they're wanting to talk about what it costs CDPR to invest, in trying to put out some additional content for this game to bring players back into it. You can't talk about that. You cannot talk about what they needed to invest to try and bring people back into this game without talking about what they did in the first place of cheating people out of their money with a broken ass product too. You can't do that. This is the kind of stuff that drives me crazy about these articles all the time. They only want to show you like one side of it or whatever, right? They don't want to talk about the other side of it. So, I'm always going to do my best to make sure that if these articles we read want to talk about, well, like these poor companies, they really, had to invest a lot to try and bring people back into this this product of theirs or whatever. You can't do that without talking about the other side of the story here. You just can't. So in its development process, Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0 cost CD Projekt Red approximately $63 million, which honestly is like a drop in the bucket compared to what they did here in the first place. In development costs and approximately $21 million in USD advertising. Putting these two costs together would have equated to over $84 million to develop and advertise Phantom Liberty, which is close to half of what it cost to develop the base game back in 2020, but nowhere near what they duped people on in the first place. When talking video games, these are pretty high cost for a lonely DLC, but Phantom Liberty wasn't just a DLC, practically feels like a brand new title. At the moment, Phantom Liberty is the only DLC that will be released for Cyberpunk 2077, will sadly stay that way. Throughout CDPR's history, there are some DLCs that will also always bring back fond memories, one of which is the Witcher 3 Blood and Wine DLC. This DLC was more set towards fan service than anything else, shows how much effort and love CD Projekt Red have for their games and their fan bases. Yeah, I mean, I've said this too, though. It's like CDPR has an issue with game releases. Their base game releases are not very good, dude. Their track record of recent history is not great. Their content's always solid. They do a much better job with their like expansion releases and stuff for their games. Whether you want to talk about, The Witcher 3 with like Blood and Wine and Heart of Stone, or you want to talk about Phantom Liberty, it's these are examples of how they do much better with their expansion releases than they do with the base games. Yeah. Witcher 3 was riddled with a ton of issues, and we recently even hit on an article where they admitted to trying to get it away with even more on the release of Cyberpunk than they did in the first place with Witcher 3, which is terrible to hear. At least they are admitting it. I think that's a step in the right direction for them. But a lot of times with a developer, if you can see the mistakes they've made, you want to see them progress and get better and not do the same thing, not try to get away with more. Due to CDPR's history with DLCs, it was evident that Phantom Liberty could be a massive hit if done right. But rather than being a fan service like Blood and Wine, it was more focused on repairing a broken game. This turned Phantom Liberty into more of an apology than fan service, but in the end, it did both. What do you think about the news regarding Phantom Liberty in Update 2.0? Did it shock you to learn how much it costs to save such a negatively reviewed game? No. No, it didn't. Not at all. But I think it should shock people to see how much, in contrast, they made off of duping people in the first place. I think that's what should be shocking to people. They made over, that the basically, it's going to be somewhere along the lines of, $750 million on just the initial sales of this game. That's not including the fact that they're up over 25 million all time in sales now, So, really, I mean, when you want to talk about what they put into Phantom Liberty, it's a drop in the bucket, dude, for what they've made all time on Cyberpunk. They've admitted they're up over 25 million retail sales all time on Cyberpunk now, which is almost half of this 13 million number that I used in the first place. And so what? I mean, what they're talking like 80 something million to develop in full Phantom Liberty. It's nothing. It's really nothing compared to what they've made off this game. And unfortunately made off of duping a lot of people in the first place. I think that's what people really need to take away here.